In the Pakistan A for EA research that I was a part of, I was involved in three different work streams. And really, what I did was I looked at my team and myself, we looked at collective action by women at many levels. We looked at their collective action in the legislative assemblies, we looked at women's movement collective action, and then we also looked at collective action of women in protest mobilizations. So we really brought together three or four different perspectives as we tried to, bring our work together and see what is the impact on women's social and political action for empowerment and accountability. So we came up with some really, really interesting findings. One of the first ones was that, feminist networks matter. In the research that we did, we discovered that women's voice in the legislative assemblies, for example, was really made possible by the women's movement campaigning for about 15 years to get a gender quota in the provincial national assemblies and the Senate of Pakistan. So we had had a quota in Pakistan, it had expired, it was very small, and then women campaigned effectively. And in 2002, a 17% quota was instituted. And suddenly, women had a kind of political voice in elected representation that they had not had before. But really, the effectiveness of that voice came through when they formed caucuses, cross party alliances of women. And these caucuses, in turn, were the most effective when they were led by feminists from the women's movement who had actually come into politics. Another interesting finding about the importance of feminist mobilization was when we looked at women in gender justice protests that were not necessarily feminist, but were involving other issues, like, for example, the rights of women workers in the healthcare sector, the rights of peasant women, the rights of a religious minority group called the Hazara, who are persecuted in Pakistan and subjected to terrorist attacks. We found that, in a context like Pakistan, where there's more and more risks involved in civic action or contentious politics, feminist leadership really made a difference because women use their feminist voice from the national platform to try to mitigate the risks for women who were involved in other contentions and to provide them with leadership and support. Not that they generated these other gender justice mobilizations, but they played a role in kind of magnifying the voice and mediating the risks and helping them to strategize a little bit more effectively, showing them how to use the courts to file petitions, how to lobby with politicians, and so on. So, in a context like Pakistan, it's really important to see how collective action at different dimensions, whether it's the feminist mobilization, whether it's contentious politics, whether it's formal politics, how collective action really makes a difference to try to get the state to listen and make more gender equality policies. It was very valuable, of course, to note that when the caucus in the assemblies was actually led by feminists, there were many new gender equality policies that came through. For example, laws against domestic violence, laws to curb honor killings, improvements in the laws against rape, and so on. Then the final really important outcome, I think, of our research was to say that to realize that donor support really matters. If you take a long view of women's collective action in Pakistan and see over the last 20, 30 years, where did support really make a difference? You find that it did make a difference that feminists were able to conduct the campaigns that they did because they got donor support, meaning leading women's advocacy NGOs got funding from international donor NGOs, for example, to run their campaign for a gender quota in local and legislative assemblies. So you see, this kind of funding matters because it sustains women who are on the margin, who are trying to push the policy agenda. And they need that sustenance when they don't have sources of support locally. So donor support mattered for the campaign. Donor support matters for supporting the caucuses. And donor support also matters for, funding projects that sustain information and awareness raising around legislative reform, like, for example, domestic violence. So these were the key findings of our research, and I think they're applicable to other contexts where women are really negotiating states that are not prioritizing gender issues and also struggling with contexts of closing civic space.